Okay, so, the idea of fighting climate change just by protecting a forest, it's really appealing, right? It feels so simple and good. But like any big puzzle, there's always a hidden piece, one that you really need to understand to see the whole picture. And that brings us right to the heart of what we're talking about today. I mean, think about it. What happens if we put a big protective fence around one forest to save it, but the world's demand for wood or farmland doesn't just disappear? Does the problem literally just pack up and move to the next forest over? This is a huge question, and the answer is critical for making sure our climate actions actually count. So let's just quickly get on the same page. When we talk about these kinds of forest projects, we're almost always talking about carbon credits. The basic idea is super simple. A project can earn 1 credit for every single ton of CO2 they can prove was kept out of the atmosphere. And they do that by stopping a forest from being chopped down. And that brings us to the star of our show, leakage. So what is it? Well, leakage is what happens when protecting that one forest causes emissions to just pop up somewhere else. The best way to think about it is like squeezing a water balloon. You push in one spot, and what happens? It bulges out somewhere else. The total amount of water in the balloon didn't change at all. And when it comes to climate change, well, that's a really big problem. Right, so this whole leakage thing, it isn't just one simple issue. It can actually happen in a few different ways. To really wrap our heads around it, let's break down the 3 main types of leakage that people running these projects have to deal with. First up, you've got activity shifting. This is the most straightforward kind. A logger was going to cut down trees here, but now it's protected. So what do? They just move their equipment to the forest across the river. Simple as that. Then there's market leakage. Now this one's a little more about economics, supply and demand. If you protect a huge forest that used to supply timber, the global supply of timber might actually go down a bit. That can push prices up, which makes it more profitable for someone maybe on the other side of the planet to start logging. And finally, there's ecological leakage. This one's a bit more niche, often related to things like wetlands. If you change the water flow in one area, you could accidentally cause a nearby ecosystem to dry out and release all its stored carbon. Okay, so leakage is definitely a real and complicated risk. But here's the good news. This isn't some new, shocking problem. It's a known challenge in the climate world, and there's a whole toolkit of rules and very specific methods designed to measure it and manage it. This isn't just a bunch of guesswork. And a huge part of that toolkit comes from standards like the Verified Carbon Standard. You might see it called VCS. It's a program run by the nonprofit Vera, and they have this incredibly detailed rulebook that projects absolutely have to follow. It's their whole job to make sure that when a carbon credit gets issued, it stands for a real, measurable climate benefit, and that leakage has been totally accounted for. Honestly, the smartest way to deal with leakage is to stop it before it even starts. And this gets to the very core of what a really high-quality project does. They don't just build a fence. They dig in and tackle the real human reasons why people were cutting down trees in the first place. They work with local communities to create better alternatives. Maybe that means helping farmers get more crops from the land they already have so they don't need to expand. Or it could be creating new jobs through things like ecotourism, or even helping them sell sustainable forest products that actually need the forest to stay standing. The real goal is to address the root causes, not just block the immediate problem. But even with the absolute best prevention plans, you still have to do the math. For that market leakage we talked about, the accounting gets pretty specific. Projects have to figure out how much they're impacting the timber supply and then apply what's called a discount factor. So if a project causes a really big drop in local timber harvesting, they might have to subtract, say, 20 to even 70% from the credits they claim. And that's just to account for the risk that they pushed that logging somewhere else in the world. And to make it even more concrete, let's go back to that first type of leakage, activity shifting. The rulebook actually gives projects an option. Instead of doing all this complex monitoring in the surrounding areas, they can choose to take a standard conservative deduction of 15%. Just right off the top. It's a simple, straightforward way to make sure that risk is covered. So we've waded through some pretty technical stuff. Discount factors, percentages, mitigation activities. Now let's just zoom out for a second and look at how this all fits into the big picture and why this level of accountability is just so incredibly important. So here's the bottom line. Being this intense and rigorous about accounting for leakage is what gives a carbon credit its power. It is the bright line between a climate action that is truly meaningful and one that just looks good on a press release. This whole process is designed to make sure that when a credit says it represents 1 ton of CO2, it actually does. And here is probably the most important thing to remember from all of this. A project doesn't get credit for the good stuff it did while ignoring the bad stuff it might have caused next door. The final number of carbon credits that gets issued is always a net number. It's the total emissions they prevented minus all the calculated risks, like leakage. It is an honest accounting of that project's true, real-world impact on our climate. So the next time you hear about a carbon credit from a forest project, you'll know it's not just some simple number. It's actually the final result of a really complex and thorough process of measuring, mitigating, and making these conservative deductions. So the question I have for you is, knowing all the work and all the accounting that goes into that number, does that change how you see these tools for climate action?